Over the years, I've been asked from women who have special requirements for going offshore, what's the best second passport for us? Today, I'm going to share with you my opinion on the best second passports for women. So anytime we get into the best second passport for women, the best second passport for Indians, the best second passport for Canadians, the first thing I caution you is there may not be a huge difference. Okay, and so what I talked about when I made a video on best second passports for Indians and South Asians was to understand that certain things that may work for Westerners going to, let's say, an Eastern European country, or maybe even some Latin American countries. Those countries may look down on you, unfortunately, and they may either play games to either kick you out of the game entirely, i.e., hey, you've got to apply for a residence permit within 30 days of entering the country, and then somehow they don't renew your visa to be able to make you eligible to do that, and then you just kind of get shut out administratively, or they're just less likely to issue you citizenship because a judge decides, or because whoever decides is less likely to do it. But many different reasons why someone who looks different than people and doesn't have the backing of a passport that they want might be excluded. And so a perfect example of that is some countries in the Gulf where you will literally be paid more for having citizenship of the US or citizenship of an EU country. And so if you were to renounce that citizenship, you're the same person, right? Let's say you get a Caribbean citizenship, you don't want to be American anymore, you're going to get paid less in some of those countries. And so you have situations like that around the world where you might want to avoid it. If you're a woman, the situation is a little bit different. So let me share my thoughts. If it's your first time here, I'm Andrew Henderson, founder of Nomad Capitalist. We're a boutique consulting firm that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best, everything from lowering your taxes to getting second citizenships, because it's important that you keep your wealth and it's important that you keep your freedom in these increasingly chaotic times. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com, and you can also join us for Nomad Capitalist Live, which is the biggest and best offshore conference out there. And so there's not a lot of quantitative data like which passport is best for women. I'll come back to a few metrics you might want to think about in a moment. But let me tell you a story. My family, for a time, lived in Washington State. I didn't, but they did. And they told me a story one day. They had a neighbor who had come from Iraq. And he was very happy to live in the United States. And he was the kind of person that everyone talks about. Was like, are you see, people are still trying to come to the United States. Yeah, I'm sure, most wealthy people in most parts of the world are very happy in their country, but if you're coming from Iraq, some very unfortunate things happened there, obviously. He was happy to live in the United States. Now, he was going to become an American citizen, and he was working towards that. He was very excited about that. But never in all their conversations with him did he talk about renouncing Iraqi citizenship or anything like that. Now, there may come a certain time, if he becomes a U.S. citizen, he'll get a U.S. passport, and that will be the only passport he has. I think that's a pretty common thing for people from that kind of country, right? I met someone once who naturalized in the United States relatively young. They were originally from Afghanistan. They don't bother, certainly now they don't bother, but even before now, they didn't bother renewing that Afghanistan passport, even though in some of those cases they may be considered a citizen. But the issue for him may be, hey, I'm not going to renew my Iraqi passport. Who cares? I don't want it. But I'm not really concerned about getting rid of the citizenship. And so if you're looking at what's the best second passport, you have to ask yourself, are you looking to be surrounded by the values that you espouse, or are you looking to have a citizenship that reflects those? And so look at some of the countries in the Caribbean, the most common destination for citizenship by investment. Those countries, for example, don't allow gay marriage. And so if you are gay or if you support gay rights, you could make a case, hey, I don't want a citizenship from a country that doesn't support that. A lot of people don't realize that. Now, are they going to change their policies because you don't give them $100,000? I've often kind of wondered, like, what message are you really sending, right? Your $100,000 is not really going to make a difference. If you don't agree with what a certain store does and you don't spend $5 there, you may feel better inside. Is that really changing anything? Some people don't want to give their $5, don't want to give their $100,000. And so in that case, sure, you're probably not going to want to go to a country that is less developed, right? I happen to think that Turkey gets more of a bad rap than it deserves. I'm not saying it's perfect. No country's perfect. But I do think that, if you say, hey, I don't want to be, I think saying I don't want to be associated with a Muslim country is short-sighted. But not everyone agrees, and that's up to you, and that's your right. Like, I don't think every country where Islam is the religion treats everyone the same way. There's countries that are extreme, and there's countries where you see people walking around being perfectly normal. You'll see, plenty of women who are dressed the same way they'd be dressed in the United States in many neighborhoods in Istanbul. You'll see gay couples in Istanbul. You'll see things that you wouldn't imagine in a so-called Muslim country. The question is, can you get over the issue of like, I don't want to live in a Muslim country, I don't like the way that they treat this or that or the other. So that's up to you to decide. So if the idea is, I just want to get a second citizenship because I want to protect myself, then those things may not matter. I'm not saying those issues don't matter, but I'm saying in the context of, I'm looking for the best second passport that solves my problems of, I want to be able to give up my citizenship either now or in the future. And I want to do so in the most affordable way possible, or the most efficient way possible, or I don't want to change my lifestyle, but I want to get a passport. Well, then yeah, I mean, a Caribbean citizenship by investment, Turkish citizenship by investment. If you're trying to get a passport quickly, maybe good options. Obviously, if you're fortunate enough to have a parent or a grandparent or a great-grandparent or occasionally great-great-grandparent who's from, let's say, a country in Europe, you would claim one of those. But if you're not, then citizenship by investment may be the fastest way for you to do that. You could also look at countries that will, if you're going to, create 100 jobs or do something really spectacular, there may be other countries that will do that for you. But again, most of those are not going to be quite as progressive as you might like. And so you have to ask yourself as a woman, what am I looking for? One of the issues that's come up recently is you see a number of women in the United States with Roe v. Wade being struck down saying, I don't like the way our country's going. This is canceling some of our fundamental human rights. You can agree with that, you cannot. But if that's what you feel, are you going to give up your U.S. citizenship in protest of that? The guy from Green Day said he was. Is he going to? I doubt it. And so most people are probably like the Iraqi guy. They don't care if they're an Iraqi citizen or not. Maybe at some point they become so comfortable traveling on their other passport, they don't live in their country of birth anymore, that they just identify as the new citizen, right? The country of the new citizenship. And so if you want to give up U.S. citizenship to protest Roe v. Wade being struck down, then I would guess that that's the reason that you're doing it. Or if you're going to be, for example, during the Vietnam War, people would renounce U.S. citizenship to protest the war. Yeah, you probably don't want to go get citizenship of another country that's like joining the war effort. You don't want to become a citizen of another country that doesn't allow abortion. And so if that's where you're at, then you want to look at countries in Europe. And you want to look at, let's say, a golden visa, where you can either live there or in some cases not. And you can work towards citizenship anywhere from 5 years to 10 years from now, plus the time on the front and back end to get it. That's obviously a big difference from 6 months or so in the Caribbean without the need to change your lifestyle or even need to go to the country. So you've got to weigh how much of those values do I want reflected in my citizenship versus how much do I just want the benefit of the second citizenship? And what I think most people do is they conflate second residence with second citizenship. Let's look at the stats, by the way. Eastern Europe, often safer, including for women. If you look at the issues of crime against women, often lower in parts of Eastern Europe. I'm not talking about Russia, but I'm talking about the Balkans, for example. I'm talking about Georgia. I'm talking about Armenia. It is better than countries like Spain or Sweden or even Belgium in some metrics. You can just look at a chart of those kinds of crimes. Certainly the Gulf is safe, right? I don't think you're going to have any generally problems there, but some people just don't feel safe. They just don't feel safe, right? As a woman, I don't want to live in the Gulf, and that's your right. I think that statistics bear some consideration, but if you just don't feel safe, then that's fine. You should have the lifestyle you want. But that's a residence question. Where do I want to live? And I wouldn't base my citizenship necessarily on where I want to live, again, unless the citizenship needs to dictate my values. If you are, again, as I imagine most people are, the Iraqi guy, why not be a St. Lucia citizen? Why not be a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis? Why does that matter? If that's what gets you the personal and economic freedom that you're looking for from a second citizenship, if that's what gives it the optionality, okay? You don't have to live in that country. Too many people are trying to live in their citizenship country, because you're not going to become a citizen of the UAE and then just because you live there. You're not going to buy citizenship of the UAE. They don't offer it, right? And so be a citizen of a country where you can get the best second citizenship. Listen, there are countries in Europe that I think some people don't necessarily agree with. I've heard from women who say, I wouldn't want to live in Sweden because I hear bad things about it. Is that true or not? I think there's varying interpretations. There are certain Eastern European countries, right? Women certainly have said, I don't want to live in Poland because they're taking away women's fundamental rights. And so if you have a Polish grandfather, why not claim the Polish citizenship, give yourself the optionality to live in any country in Europe, and just say, you know what, I'm Polish, I don't agree with it. The same way I'm American and don't agree with it, or I'm Canadian and don't agree with it, right? And by the way, you could argue, hey, maybe the politicians on that issue change eventually. If it's an issue where it's women's rights, I would like to think that unlike tax policy, unlike general freedoms, I would like to think that the world is moving, regardless of how quickly you think it's moving this way, it's moving in the right direction on human rights. I mean, countries like Saudi Arabia have opened up, right? And so you have some countries, maybe like a Poland, that you might think are going in the wrong direction. Is that going to be the case forever? And would you not claim that citizenship because you don't want to be associated with that? I would say you wouldn't. You would be a Polish citizen and you'd say, hey, I want the option to live in France. I want the option to live in Norway. I want the option to live in Ireland. And I feel safe, and I feel like that they respect women's rights there. So the citizenship really isn't the issue. The issue, again, unless it's really like your identity, and I can identify with that because I ultimately gave up U.S. citizenship because I just didn't like the identity. I didn't like all the stuff. I didn't like traveling around the world. Oh, the Americans. I just didn't like that. That's for a separate video. But for most folks, you're going to keep your citizenship. You're going to be a dual citizen, and it's a matter of where you live. And so get the citizenship that best serves you, then get the residence permit that best represents your interests. I don't think most countries are going to look down on you for applying for your residence as a citizen of Dominica, for example. So if you're a single woman and you want one of the most affordable passports out there and you don't have the claim to citizenship by descent, and you're not running a mega business where maybe somebody would just say, hey, come on in, bring your 100 people here and we'll help you out. You don't have millions of euros to donate to rebuild an opera house in Austria, that kind of thing. Then you go to Dominica, you get that passport, and they say, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to get Ireland's Stamp Zero program if I'm not working. Or I'm going to go and get a self-sufficient visa somewhere in France, or I'm going to get it in Spain, or I'm going to get it in Portugal, or I'm going to get Austria's independent means visa. I'm going to live there. Now, some of those places, if you're looking for the ultimate in equal rights, probably have higher taxes. And so Southern Europe has, generally speaking, the better tax incentives in Europe, and people could argue those are, in some areas, the more conservative parts of Europe. If you want to live in Norway, you're going to pay. There's really not much way around that. In countries like that, generally speaking, you don't have that many options. That's the other question. Am I willing to pay more tax to live in a place that respects my values on a personal level, right? And so there's a number of different, you can just go and look at all of our different content on living the trifecta. Could you live in 3 or 4 different places around the world every year and keep your tax burden lower that way and have a nice lifestyle? But you've got to decide what role citizenship plays in your life, what role it plays in your identity. I think the linchpin for most folks is going to be the residence and where you're actually spending your time, whether it's one country, 3, 4, or whether you're a perpetual traveler. And I think that you can get that in that way. Certainly European countries score the lowest in corruption in many cases, particularly in Northern Europe, score the lowest in personal freedoms, press freedoms, freedom of speech, higher than the United States in general. And those countries are, again, in Northern Europe. And so I think having access to it is valuable, which is why having some kind of EU citizenship, if it's really about identity, would be valuable. So if I can get any EU citizenship, any European citizenship by descent, I'll claim that, and I'll just know I can live somewhere else, right? Again, whether it's Poland, whether it's Hungary, maybe I don't entirely agree with them, but I have optionality now to live in other places. If you don't have that citizenship by descent, then you could look at Malta's citizenship program. 18 months, you're going to spend close to $1 million, even if you're single. So that's an expensive chunk. But now you've got access to, again, all those countries in Europe. You can get a golden visa, work your way towards the citizenship in as little as, let's call it 6 years by making an investment. And unlike Malta, you get to recoup that investment, hopefully in the future. If you're willing to actually spend time somewhere and you're willing to pay taxes, then the world opens up. And you've got countries from Ireland to Malta to Italy to Portugal to Cyprus that offer tax incentives to where you could live there, pay something, but not pay a lot. And so which of those appeals most to you? That's a question only you can answer. We help people do it at Nomad Capitalist all the time. You can go to nomadcapitalist.com and learn how we can help you. But I think that citizenship is probably not as important for most people. Where you live and where you hold residence is actually the thing that you want to consider. And on that, you've got to decide, again, is it the statistics of what matters, or is it the vibe and the culture that matters most?